Please welcome to the stage Dr. Douglas Melton.
Every year when I come to the conference, I'm struck by the variety that's in this room. From the types of institutions to the experience of the individuals, it is truly incredible. But what I'm really encouraged by is the fact that we arrive with a collection of shared values and interests, but when we leave, we'll even have more. And that's absolutely true of a conference like this. So I'm thrilled that you're here. Thank you for committing the time. Let's just acknowledge the fact that this is a group that has some shared interests. Would you do something for me? Turn to 3 people around you and say simply, "You're valuable." Let's do that. You know, I wasn't sure how that was going to go, but that was pretty convincing. That was very convincing. Value is a tricky word. This focus on value, but you know, one thing I've learned is that when linguists look at value, it actually is the 500th most used word in the American English language. Right along, it has good company, better, different, staying, received, just slightly beat it out. That's from a conceptual point of view, that's kind of interesting and good company. The point, my job today, is my portion of my talk, is to get us into thinking about value as a concept. It's a tricky word. And in fact, if you will think of this like an expedition, like a journey, like a story that we're building together, what we're going to do is explore this concept of value and take a look at it. And this will be preparing us for the rest of the conference and even some of the interactions that we will have with each other. And it's important because when you consider what our shared mission is to graduate engineers with an entrepreneurial mindset so that they can create personal, economic, and societal value. And this shows up certainly even in other things like our framework. It's one of the 3 C's. You know, and part of that is developing a mindset so that engineers habitually identify opportunities to create extraordinary value. So it's an important concept, and these words to me are really critical because a word is like this container of this collection of ideas. And a collection of ideas has to be treated with care, and we get some mileage if we develop something together around that collection of ideas. So, our first spelunking tour is going to Princeton's WordNet, their lexical database. I don't know if you've ever used anything like this, but if you put something into this, you'll find some associations, like value gets associated with precious or quantitative. Values can be tied to belief. Or the word something like value systems is connected to ethics. Or valuable gets more complex, or the word value itself is really complex. So if you have ever talked to a student about creating value, what did you mean? Seriously. Let's figure that out. And it's an interesting thing to just pause and explore. One of the ways to explore this is through kind of the traditional production line. You could say a certain amount of time adds value to a product, or an individual adds value. I was challenged just before Christmas. A colleague talked about a lunch lady at her school, Mrs. Woods. And this particular lunch lady happened to deliver more than just the planned end product, more than a plate of spaghetti. This particular lunch lady would deliver some wisdom, a smile. That mic working okay? I'm pulling on it just that. Okay. She would deliver maybe an appropriate admonition. She was revered. And this colleague said, well, is she creating value with her students? Is there some value creation? She had a point. And so I started thinking about this value term and this theme of this conference and wondered, what is it when you go, bingo, that's value? What is the right combination? There's something special when we finally say, that's value. And you've had that experience. So, what I did, I started reading a lot. In fact, reading what companies wrote about value. Reading what many of the people in the room are authors on a collection of papers that are about creating meaning and worth. Getting engineers to understand a design approach that includes value creation. Or focusing on frameworks like the NABC framework, which is all about creating value. You know, that just took me down a rabbit trail, because as soon as you start reading about value and trying to understand value, you discover its underpinnings, and it is certainly the foundation of politics, economics, philosophy, psychology. Value is a central idea, all of those things. So you can just keep reading as long as you would like about value. But fundamentally, there is something about value that's tied to being human. So, when I'm faced with something like this, I have to stop reading and go do an experiment. In fact, you need a laboratory. So I thought, I need a laboratory to test some ideas that I've learned about value. And so I went looking for, I'm going to go in the wild, or at least in the suburbs, somewhere. The epitome of value. I pull over the garage sale. I walk up the driveway. I look at the garage, see the owner, the homeowner. I look at the garage, and there I see them. You know, some people get excited when they might see a sign that says free puppies that will tug at their heartstrings. This is my equivalent. You know, speakers, like dogs, are one of the few things in this world that love you back if you feed them well. So, I saw them, and I thought, here's a couple of strays that I need to take home and help. And I made the offer. I said, $15. This was one of those garage sales that doesn't have any market prices. So, $15. The homeowner said, no, $20, and you have to take some other stuff. This homeowner understood the fundamental garage sale principle. Move the merchandise out of the home. So, as another buyer was approaching, I quickly said, scan that big box. I don't even know it. I'll take whatever's in that big box and these speakers. Deal, and I carted it all home. Now, I'm sharing this with you because this was an illustration as I started to break it down about value. I was taking all the readings that I was learning and I was applying it to, don't you want to know what's in the box? I hope you do. So, item number one that went home, of course, the loudspeakers. Item number two, 12 walking canes. I don't know why that's funny, but it is to me. So, item number three, okay, and the final contents was this leather bag that had an embossed name on it. I presume the name was very unique. The name, these are the items actually. The name is unique, and so it was Googleable. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But not a bad haul. $15, or no, $20 it was. $20. And these three items, you go, what is the lesson in value for these things? But before I tell you about that, let me share something about that bag, if I may. Had an embossed name that was unique. It was presumed the former owner a long time ago, the original owner of this bag, apparently. So I Googled it, and fairly quickly I found some phone numbers. And I decided, well, this seems to be so unique, I'll just call. I actually contacted her, and to her surprise, she wondered how I ultimately ended up with this bag. She's a descendant of the original owner. And I said, do you want this thing back? And she said, no, and I told her what I was going to do with it. She said, if you use it in the presentation, at least share something about the individual who owned it. So we had a nice little discussion about the individual who owned this. And well, what do you want me to share? Something about courage and commitment. I even ended up with a couple of pictures. So, these three items, where's the illustration in value around this sort of thing? Where's the jackpot? Where's the bingo for value? Well, if you start trying to break this down, some of the readings would talk about an exchange value. To get a bingo, you have to have something to offer. Your product has to be worth an exchange. That's not always money. Sometimes it's time, sometimes it's commitment, sometimes it's information. But that exchange value is one dimension of value that we need to be able to explain and talk with our students about. As they're creating something in the world, doing their engineering, whatever they're doing should have an exchange value. That's what the speakers represented in this particular case. Instrumental value. Okay, 12 canes. I might not need 12 canes right at the moment, perhaps someday, but kind of like having a snow shovel in July. Sometimes things are not useful, sometimes they are useful, but that utility portion, instrumental value is the value because there's a means to an end. And at the right time, something like a cane would be highly valuable, indispensable. Then there's something that's kind of elusive, that doesn't fit in either category. Intrinsic value, that end itself, if you think about courage, compassion, commitment, those things are certainly valuable, but they don't neatly fit in the other two categories. So my simple lesson, applied to this garage sale purchase, even included something symbolic. You can ascribe things a type of value, like symbolic. This has symbolic value, human value, family values. So this became useful to kind of start breaking things down as I was thinking about how do we talk to our students, your students, how do you talk to your students when you say creating value? You have some of these things in mind. Well, if you think back to the mission that we just talked about, there was another dimension. And one more dimension is societal and personal value. I had to go to a burger laboratory. I couldn't stay at the garage sale for this. So I thought back to one of the first TED Talks I'd ever seen, and I pulled a couple of images from that particular TED Talk. You may have seen this image at some point in the TED Talk. If you start talking about societal value, big problems like this exist in the world. The lack of an optometrist to do some diagnoses so that they can prescribe something that helps vision. Here's another image from the same talk. This talk was given by a creator, educator, entrepreneur, Joshua Silver. This is an older TED Talk, one of the first ones that I saw. He's an Oxford physicist and now working in the Center for Vision in the Developing World. And the solution, as you can see up there, his value creation project was to say, instead of having an optometrist, be your own optometrist. And in fact, create a deformable lens so that you can adjust it, a fluid-filled lens so that you can adjust the diopter of the lens just by adjusting the fluid. Be your own optometrist. And I thought that's creating value, and I also appreciated the fact that many others look at these problems on how to solve a problem with different value creation solutions. For example, just recently, a few months ago, a company comes out with a diagnostic, it's called an aberrometer. So the idea is that you don't need an ophthalmologist to do a measurement of what's necessary to correct the vision. A layman can simply do this measurement with a not low cost, but fairly much lower cost, half the cost of what a normal aberrometer would need. Send it off and get a pair of standard eyeglasses. Or you find other people that are saying, we're going to create value addressing some of the same things, like 3D printing optics. This Dutch company, uses a monomer, millions of droplets, and you don't end up having to polish this afterwards, and you can have kind of interesting optical designs through a 3D print process. Was that the solution that's going to be the winning one? Or maybe even the root of the problem, going back to what do you need to do to the eye itself? Gollum Payman here is the creator of LASIK and just says, well, you can address that directly through medical technology. Now, I bring all this up because this creating value, as you talk to your students, as you think about this, it's like having a bunch of vectors. but they're all generally kind of pointed the same way, right? And all those vectors stack up to progress. And the way to get your students, how you work with them in the projects that you work with them, the programs that you develop, it's important to have this focus on creating value where they are with their resources, with their skills, and with their talents. Now, you can already figure out I have a habit of calling people. And so I reached out to Golden Payment. And I was astounded. This individual has 120 US patents, almost 900 technical papers, 10 books. I didn't even know that there was a Hall of Fame. I would like to see inside. It's terrible. He's a winner of a National Medal of Technology and Innovation. He's an ophthalmologist and an engineer. I called him up. I said, would you just talk about value with me? And tell me, you started a $2 billion industry that has had all sorts of spin-offs, connected things to it, further developments, but he's credited with starting a large industry. And it's seen its ups, it's seen its downs, but it has certainly been a hotbed of technology and a new type of work. So he said, yeah, I'll talk about value with you, and we spent, the interview turned into a discussion.
One thing I could not tolerate to see somebody suffer. For me, value was not necessarily money.
That was the general sentiment, which is a powerful sentiment about creating personal and societal value. Something that was certainly internally motivated. But you know the interesting part of this conversation, I can't show it, but the interesting part of this conversation got where at the end of it, he said, Doug, you have to start thinking about the future. He was concerned that I was just focused on his work. He said, if you work at a foundation, you've got to start working with people. He didn't know about what we do here. He said, you've got to start working with people who focus on future value. And I said, do you mean something like, where there's one spin-off that happens and is connected to another technology and it creates something else? Kind of like how LASIK and NASA NASA Johnson worked on a kind of laser ranging for space station docking, and then that got connected to eye tracking, and then that got connected to LiDAR, which is used for cars or autonomous vehicles. I said, do you mean that kind of future? He said, no. He said, you've got to work more. He said, that will happen. That's going to happen. He said, you've got to start working more at the root of where this value is. And I couldn't help but think about you and what you do. What a pleasure to work with you. As you work with students and you're focused on them creating value, that is so critical to our future. So as you think about this, here's my scorecard. Here is my bingo card of a really successful value. Thank you very much.